At Journey Church, we offer real-life help for real-life needs. Join us now for a time of amazing hope and practical help from the Bible. Join us at Journey Church.
I want to start today with the first of a series for this month. And the series is entitled Anno Domini. Say it with me. Anno Domini. Or shortened AD. Anno Domini. Many of us don't know where Anno Domini came from. We know if we've studied any of our Greek or Latin, we understand that it means in the year of our Lord. What you don't know is the battle that took place to make that happen. You see, a change needed to happen in Rome and in the early church. Because the early church had become very focused on persecution. They'd become very focused on things negative. They were caught up in their past, and they couldn't move. Have you ever been to a place in your life that you felt like you were stagnant? Anybody ever been there? Where you weren't going forward, you weren't going back, you weren't even going left or right. You're just kind of stuck. Well, we have to understand that every day belongs to God. And that God has a plan for our life. And it's our ability or inability to focus that creates this stuckness in our life. I know that's not really a word, but let's pretend like it is. I want to kind of, if I just give you a simple visual illustration. You see light, see my little flashlight here? Light is light, right? And God didn't design you to live okay? But yet this flashlight, watch, this flashlight is not focused. See this? This light will shine on my hand. But if I shine it right down here on you, look at your clothing. It's not lighting you up. It's not a focused light. But the difference between a flashlight and a laser is just one thing. Focused light. Focused light can penetrate inches of steel. Focused light can create, can destroy, can change things. And God has placed His light inside of you. But which one do you want? Do you want the focus light? Or do you want the flashlight? Let me take you real quick to a little video that it kind of summed things up for me. Kind of put it in perspective of how I want to approach 2017. So, guys, if you would, dim the lights and start the video up for me, if you would, please.
As you hoped. Things took a turn, a bump, a darkened sky. And at times it may have seemed there was no hope. But here's the good news. Our God is the God of fresh starts. Our God is the God of new beginnings. Our God brings new mercies, new compassions, not just once a year, not just when things are bad, but every single morning. This year has been tough. And for many of us, things will never be the same. But we are here, breathing, maybe smiling, or crying, or shouting, or laughing. But we are here, feeling, maybe fighting, or cheering, or seeking, or grieving, but we are here, living. And we are not alone. Our God is here. Our God is with us. And our God is the God of new creations.
Anno Domini. Say it again. Anno Domini. See, the year was about 526, Anno Domini. The Roman Catholic Church had come into its full power. The papacy of Rome now ruled Christianity. Constantine and his family had created edicts of toleration to allow Christianity to be born. But then the Constantinian family and hierarchy began to destroy all the Jewishness that made Christianity Christianity. They began to remove the vital part that mankind used in worship. You may not realize this, but prior to there being a BC AD, there was an AM. And I'm not talking about the morning time, but it was Anno Mundi. Anno Mundi, which meant the year of our world. And all of civilization had used AM to determine, listen to this, to determine when Christ was to return. All of civilization around the world. They've dug up tombstones all over Palestine and back in Europe and the European countries. And they had dates written out, 5562 AM. Why? Because mankind has always believed that in the 7,000th year, Christ would return, that God would come back to complete what he started. Mankind believed that Christ was born 5,500 AM. Because of this, they believed, because they didn't follow John's teaching in Revelation. They believed Christ would not return in the 7,000th year, but in the 6,000th year. Which meant if they believed and their calendar was right that he was born at 5,500 AM, that he would return at 6,000 AM. We're now in the year 562 on the other side of the 5,500. So we're 2 years late on Christ's return. And the church is a little upset because they've been holding to this pattern of belief that Christ was going to come back. Anybody remember the book years ago, 88 Reasons Why Christ is going to come in 88? Anybody remember the revision written in 89? Just wondering. And y'all think that's a new problem. No, it's not a new problem. Understand. Please understand. In Colossians, it always confused me. Colossians, I think it's about chapter 3, maybe verse 11, I'm not sure, where Paul wrote and said that that there are no more Jews nor Gentiles, male, female, slave or free. But he also goes on to name another group of people. He said there are also no more Scythians. And that's always kind of struck me as weird, but I never really did any research in it until we were, in the Bahamas this past week. Yes, I got to spend Christmas in the Bahamas with the Cranks. Did not get a suntan. Instead, I got a bad cold and I stayed in my room the whole trip. was a lot of fun. But I did get some time to read and study. And in part of my study, here's what I found out. The Scythians are a Iranian-speaking, Iranian-Romanian group of people. That's the area of Scythia. And this group of people, they were bred for war. They were fighters from childhood up, even their babies. When their young boys were born, they were tattooed, they were shaven, they were marked, they were cut, they were scarred, they were taught to endure pain. They lifted stones, they were handy with weapons. They taught their children. If you ever watched that movie 300 about the Spartans, kind of take that and put it on steroids, and you've got the Scythians. Okay? The Scythians invented their own swords, their own weapons. They were a vicious, brutal, violent people. But to take it further, they were potheads. Their clothing was made out of hemp fiber. If you've ever heard of hemp rope, that fiber is the actual fiber of a hemp plant. You see, before hemp was ever smoked, it was taken and pressed and beaten, and the fibers are so strong that they were used not only to make rope, but to make clothing as well. Well, the Scythians clothed themselves they wore hemp clothing. They used hemp rope. They had hemp-laced weapons, but they also had huge pot parties. They invented the bong. I am not kidding you. Go look it up. They would meet in rooms. They would light a fire. They would throw piles of hemp, of marijuana on these piles, fill the room up with smoke, and everybody would have spiritual experiences. Well, these were some bad people. Okay? They were party hardy, warrior, vicious, mean, bloodthirsty, bad people. And out of them, there's a group called the Royal Scythians. And these people, they believed that they were descended from gods. You got to understand this. Because the coolest part of this is, one of these men found Christ. He became the monk. He became the monk, and I wrote his name down here because it is so cool. His name, where do I have it? I wrote it somewhere. Yeah, here it is. His name is Dionysius Exiguus. Now you have to understand the name Dionysius was part of the dynasty. He was of royal blood. So I want you to envision in your mind for a moment a Christian who wouldn't fit in most of our churches, who was a big, bad, tattooed, pierced up, shaved head, potentially bow-legged, muscled up, just a warrior. And they tagged him Exiguus, which in the native tongue means the humble. The biggest man in the room was the most humble man in the room. Christ so radically changed his life that he could no longer be who he used to be. Well, here he is in the church. The date for Christ's return is past. And he's upset by the condition of the church. But he's a quiet man. He's an humble man, well studied, spoke 3 different languages fluently, was a man's man. He wasn't, a little Renaissance dude. He was a man's man. And he's upset because people are losing heart and they're losing faith. But there's one thing he knows he can do. He sits down and mathematically begins to fix the problem. You see that the followers of Constantine in the Roman Catholic Church decided to quit using the calendar that the Jews used. The Jews did everything based on the lunar calendar, based on the cycles of the moon. And they set what we would call the Easter holiday, the Passover feast, around the cycle of the moon. But the Roman Catholic Church, who came from Constantine's brain, and Constantine had been a follower of Mithra or Ra, or the sun god, converted all dates to the solar calendar, not the lunar calendar. And this extremely upset this young monk. So he sat down mathematically and began to prove that the calendars and their dates of the Julian calendar were wrong. He created what we know as the Orthodox Gregorian calendar. And in this calendar, he set these dates. That may not be a big deal to you, but Constantine's family had put out an edict that said anyone who holds on to any Jewishness of Christianity will be beheaded, will be slaughtered, and murdered publicly. And this young warrior said, do your best. Right's right, wrong's wrong. I know where I stand. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to buy into this calendar system. That's part one. Part two was this. 50, 60 years prior, the church had taken a big hit. A Roman emperor had stepped to the throne named Diocletian. And Diocletian was equally a narcissistic, self-loving, crazy, evil man. He believed as emperor of Rome that he was God. Raised up in the streets, brought up as a poor man, he fought and worked his way up until he sat on the throne and believed he was a god. But here was the problem. In believing that he was a god, who does God ask advice from? So he would go to soothsayers and wizards and witches to get advice. Well, guess who Christianity had a direct impact on? Witchcraft. So here's the emperor going, what do I need to do to move the country forward? What do I need to do to pull my people together? And they're all going, if you'll kill the Christians, it'll work. Just go kill the Christians and everything will work out. So you've got this emperor who is so evil. Please understand, when I say evil, he boiled entire families alive. If you go to Israel with me in March, I'm going to take you to the amphitheaters where the Olympic Games were put in play. And all the Olympic Games were about killing Christians, the mauling, the goring, the fighting, the lions, the tigers, the bears. Oh my. He would take Christians and roll them in tar and feathers and put them on poles and put them in his garden and set them on fire at night so he could have light to walk by. Vicious man. And the church didn't get smaller, it got bigger. The more they tried to kill the Christians, the greater the influence the Christians began to have. Roman citizens sitting in the arenas, watching the Christians fight to get out in front of a lion so they could be eaten. Singing with peace and joy while they were set on fire, never feeling pain. Never feeling pain. Roman citizens were jumping out of the stands and laying their lives out to save Christians, further infuriating the emperor in his attempts to destroy Christianity. But the church, in its governmental structure, kept trying to control things. The church, in their politics and in their desire for control, thought if we can just control the calendar, we can tell people when to worship, how to worship, where to worship. Doesn't that sound familiar? You see, the true Sabbath day is really Saturday. Anyone who studies knows that. It's not Sunday. Sunday is the day that the Christians worshiped, the Jews worshiped on Saturday. But then you've got God speaking through David, who says that God made every day and he honors every day. He esteems no day above the other. You've got Jesus, who broke the laws of the Sabbath and then looks at the disciples and the Pharisees and says, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. You've got Jesus who's going, hey, you don't just worship me one day a week. My God, worship me every day of the week. But you got people still going, nah, we got to go worship in this place, in this building, and we've got to do it with pipe organs and robes and hymnals, and we have to do it this way and that way. And I'm not knocking those things. I'm saying that for so many of us, we think that that's it. That's it. And truthfully, that may be your form or your expression of worship. But that's just a form and an expression. Worship is giving so much worth and love and honor to that you would lay down your life for. Well, would I lay down my life for Christ? Yes. Would you? It's easy to say. Somebody walks in with a gun, what you gonna do? I know I worship my wife and my children. I'd lay down my life for them right now. There are those things in your life that you really care about. But there are those things that you're like a flashlight. You're just not focusing on it quite yet. If I carried you to Philippians chapter 3, verse 12, reading from the NLT. Philippians 3, verse 12, and then verse 13. Here's what Paul, how many of you ever heard of a guy named Paul? He lived a long time ago, didn't he? You still heard of him. He's a pretty famous dude, isn't he? Pretty good Christian too, wrote most of the New Testament. You understand that? Would you categorize him as an average Christian or above average? So here we have Paul, above average Christian. Look what he says. I don't mean to say that I've already achieved these things or that I've already reached spiritual perfection. He said, I don't have it yet. You see, the first thing, if you're ever going to go from this to this, the first thing you have to realize is, I'm not there yet. Say that with me. I'm not there yet. Now that you've said it, how do you act? Because you see, nothing humbles anybody more than a good dose of reality. Because when you don't walk in reality, you walk in self-righteousness. And self-righteousness says, I'm better than you. And some of y'all look at me and go, I'm not self-righteous. Honey, you don't know how sneaky self-righteousness is. I walked into a restaurant last night, and there's a young gentleman there, good-looking young guy, that in about 3 seconds I picked up on the fact that he's got some transgender issues. And immediately in my heart, I went, And I'm doing this, right? And my youth pastor and his wife run up to this guy, embrace him, hug him, start talking to him. Little reality check. All of a sudden I'm going, okay, Tom, why didn't you do that? I know why I didn't do that. Because I'm self-righteous. Can you examine yourself honestly? I mean, I'm just being honest with you. If you think you're coming to church with a perfect pastor, nope. I'm going to quote Paul and say, I haven't gotten there yet. And guess what? You haven't either. Don't talk to your family like you've gotten there yet. Don't talk to strangers like you've gotten there yet. Don't talk to people like you know everything. You see, if you really want to impress people, just be real. Don't be plastic. Don't be a mannequin, be a human. The first thing Paul's saying for me to become focused is I've got to realize I don't have it all figured out spiritually, but by the grace of God, I'm going to get to work on it. Now, here's how we get to work on it, okay? Look at the next verse. Look at 3:13 in the NLT and what Paul says. Chapter 3, verse 13. He says, no, dear brothers and sisters, I have not achieved it, but I, say it with me, focus on this one thing. What one thing? Forgetting the past. Well, obviously, I can't forget the past. Because if I forget the past, I don't learn from my mistakes. I just repeat them. It's not what he's talking about. He's talking about spiritual things. He said, I've got to learn to quit focusing on accomplishments I've made in my life that were not spiritual. Because you see, it's only the spiritual things that are going to last. The other things aren't. Sweetheart, listen. When you die, your wife, your kids, strangers, and the government are going to enjoy everything you've worked your life off for. they're going to have a ball with it. They're going to fight over it and split it and gamble over it and have fun taking everything from you. Honest to God. And you know, if you're retirement age, go do everything you can real quick, because you're going to hit your golden years very shortly. And the reason they call them the golden years is it takes a lot of gold to stay alive during those years. Because the doctors swoop in. And honey, they're going to take everything you got before you leave what little bit you got left to your children. We got several doctors that come to church here, and they pay good tithe off of this. I'm not complaining. I'm just telling you a fact of life. You understand? Say amen. You need a change in 2017. It needs to be Anno Domini. It needs to be the year of our Lord. You see, the church had bought into saying, oh, it's 2017, the year of Diocletian. It'd be like saying, oh, it's going to be the year of Trump. Last 8 years, we've said it's been the years of the Democrats. Or the Jewish people would say, it's the year of the Gentile. And this little monk is just trying to get everybody to say, no. It's the year of our Lord. It's the year of our Lord. You see, every year has been the year of our Lord. But our focus has been on the things behind us. And we've let the things behind us determine where we're going to go now. No. If you're going to loot the city, you're going to have to worship your way in. And you can't worship looking backwards. You can only worship living in the moment. And in this moment, God is great. And He is greatly to be praised. He is still almighty. I don't care who sits in the White House. He's never been part mighty or some mighty. He's still almighty. He is still on the throne. He's still madly in love with you. And for it to be Anno Domini to you, you're going to have to hone in. Let me close with this last verse from Joshua 1 and 9. It's becoming one of my favorite verses. Joshua 1 and 9. And here's what God told Joshua. He said, have I not commanded you? Say it with me. Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with you wherever you go. Anno Domini. This is the year of our Lord.
Thank you for joining us today at Journey Church. Join us on our journey. Contact us on the web at www.journeychurchmb.com. For Pastor Tom Wallace and all the congregation at Journey Church, may God richly bless you today.